Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to all our friends, viewers, stakeholders, fans of Africa Rise with Susan West, family, and friends. It's a wonderful Tuesday. Yeah, it's a Tuesday. We're back here again. So, of course, as you join this broadcast, do the needful, invite your friends, send in your questions and comments. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to any of our channels, please do so. And it's Africa Rise TV on YouTube and Facebook. Yes, so today we're talking about the rise of feminism in Africa. And my guest is Starman Alpha and also a very good friend of mine who will be joining in. Her name, she's a massive fashion designer from Nigeria, Zizi Kado. Hopefully she'll be able to join the broadcast as we carry on. So yes, let's see if there's anybody to acknowledge. We'll quickly do that, then we carry on. Oh, Gupta, RSA, South Africa. Welcome. Yes, so we decided to do this topic about the rise of feminism in Africa because of the trends of having young African girls talking in in social media spaces about not wanting to have children anymore with black men. They have this very extreme views of the black man, and some of them even advocating stopping not wanting their generation to continue to make babies with black men. And for me, I just thought, how can a group of people plan their own extinction by themselves? Like, how can young people, black girls, have such a mindset where they don't understand the bigger impact that would have? So basically, we want to talk about the rise of feminism in Africa to understand when feminism became a thing in Africa, because there are people who will argue that the African cultures did not need, to be participant in the suffragettes movement or the suffrage, however you want to call it, because Some people have argued that African societies were devoid of such inequalities that they did African women did not need to, um, you know, fight for equality, so to speak, because after all, that is how this feminism or feminist ideas are born. So basically, we will be looking at the different aspects of feminism, which right now, what is being marketed or really flogged around by young African girls is the radical feminism. And um, there are different aspects of feminism, and some there are other parts that you sometimes want to agree with, and then not always. Of course, there are the pros and cons to all the types of feminism that they have. They have the radical, the Marxist. They have the liberal feminism, and also the difference feminism. But the one that I feel that is more propagated nowadays is the radical one, and it's very scary. So my guest, Starman Alpha, is waiting in the wings. Marcel, welcome. He says, Negropean at its best. That's why we need our own school, hospital, bank, and grow our own food. Greetings, Rahina Bello. Yes, greetings. Where's Starman Alpha? Can we have him on screen? Starman Alpha, long time
Hi,
no see. Starman,
greetings.
my dear brother.
How are
This is
you?
such an interesting topic for me because, you and I have had this conversation at a private, on a private level. And I've had arguments of what I'm for and against. But the scary part of that conversation, which led to us having it today publicly, is the radical aspect or radical part of feminism that is being propagated by young girls of nowadays. So you start with first. Let's go into what feminism is by your definition.
Okay, now, um, the feminist movement starts in the early 1800s in Britain, when British women fighting for rights, particularly vote.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the time, it wasn't really these women that couldn't vote. The British society was such that only men over 30 could vote. Men who were prisoners under 30, basically, there was a strict criteria even for you to give you access to the vote.
Mm.
And a lot of men were excluded from that. But all the women were pretty much excluded from that.
Right.
So, and also, this was the height of the Victorian age where, um, the British patriarchy, the the way they were functioning, it was, the women themselves could see the stark discrimination between
Mm-hmm.
a man's status and a woman's status.
Mm-hmm.
So something like the vote that, you know, back then for the average citizen in those states back then, they felt gave them active participation in their political future. The women now gathered round to fight for access to the vote. And they did it literally, they knew, like, if the men did it, if the men that couldn't vote did it, they would have been shot,
Right.
they would have been imprisoned, whatever. So the women took it upon their head, almost as if to dare their government, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to shoot your women?
Right.
And believe it or not, it got violent because at some point the government tried to use force on the women. I think there was a particular route where they opened fire, and then the women themselves went radical as to the point where one of them even made a bomb.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So eventually, the government of the day realized, oh, this is stupid. We can't. Unless we want to declare civil war against our women, so they acquiesced and gave in.
Yeah.
And this was how women now gained access to the vote in Britain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, this suffragettes movement was happening in Britain. Britain was in southern Nigeria colonizing. They just started. They just basically the slave trade had ended. They were now trying to stop the slave trade. But remember, I
Mm-hmm.
always say that slave trade, that slavery didn't stop because what happened
Mm.
was slavery just stopped. But immediately after slavery, colonialism started.
Mm.
So colonialism was when they were now trying to gain access to the interior of the forest regions of West Africa or the places where they built their coastal ports. So um, when they came to Yoruba land, they had to fight a war first. In fact, when they came to Yoruba land, they had to fight a war first. When they came to Igbo land, they had to fight a war first. The Ekumeku War in Igbo land. And in Yoruba land, the way they systematically targeted the Obas, and brought them down one by one, sometimes even setting one Oba off against another Oba. So after the conquest, the domination, the violent domination, they noticed in both Igbo land and Yoruba land that the women control the markets. The women ran all the men who go do all the industry, like maybe gather natural resources like logs if they need whatever they need logs for, or even cultivate the yam, the heavy cultivating. But the women will tend to the yam as it's growing through the season. The women will harvest the yam, or sometimes depending on what it is, the men will harvest it. And then, but the women will take it to the market and be behind all the internal trading within whether it's Igbo or whether it's Yoruba society. Like in Yoruba land, when you hear Iyaloja, a lot of people will hear it and probably think it doesn't mean anything. Iyaloja
Mm.
was a title back then for a very powerful woman who it was like Iyaloja was like you know how you have financial minister today.
Yeah.
Iyaloja had something, egalitarian version of that. That was what that title represents. Iyalode or Iyalode, I think there are two titles.
Yeah.
She was the head of that particular market. Basically, she controlled the economy of that village or that
Mm.
however many villages shared that market. You know, And it, it, so the British people saw that, wow, these women had economic power, unlike their own women who were under a patriarchy. And they even saw how powerful these women could be. And they set about, with us with this economic power they had, and they set about systematically destroying this economic power that the Igbo and Yoruba women had. It took them about 10 years in Igbo land and about 10 years as well in Yoruba land to destroy this power, to take this power away from the women.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that are you trying to say that there was equality among the genders in African cultures, taking for instance Yoruba and Igbo cultures that you've mentioned? Are you trying to say that there was equality? Because the whole
Yes, but when I
idea
say
of feminism movement is the fight for equality, even though like the aspect of feminism that is scary for me is the radical part of it that seems to always almost want to drive into extinction the male the male folk, so to speak. So I, which is so scary because I don't understand who thinks in their right mind that that's even something that should be possible at all, even if So, are you trying to say that there was equality in African cultures? Otherwise,
yes, there was an equality of status, but there was also division of labor. So the women had what they did, and the men had what they did. It's not like this feminism today where you know a woman will just look and say, "Oh, why are the top 50 directors in companies men? We need women in there," and then you start trying to just force some sort of, I don't know, quota system or something to take. In the past, both genders, I mean, the division of labor between the genders is something that happened like 100,000 years ago. Even before man settled down and started farming, the men went on hunting expeditions and the women foraged. See, this power, economic power women had, it's not even new. It's not like, oh, it only started in Igbo land or Yoruba land. When man was still a hunter gatherer, uh, the division of labor that occurred between the genders back then actually led to women having this same economic power. The men would had to go and hunt big game, big animals like antelope, buffalo, and they sometimes they'll go in on hunting expeditions for like 2 3 weeks. They won't come back to where their families are camped. They'll go on hunting expeditions, and what they hunted was necessary for the survival of the group in terms of if you needed enough leather to cover someone fully to make clothing. It's only when you get something like an antelope or a buffalo you can get that other amount of leather. But hunting is also dangerous. If just because you shot something with bow and arrow doesn't mean you will just fall down and die straight away. If it's something as big as a bull, it's going to charge at you. So hunting is actually dangerous. But it needed to be done. Things like the horns of the bull or the antelope were needed for drinking vessels, ornaments, even weapons, hunting weapons, tools, all those kind of things. Their bones as well. But the women, so basically, when man was hunter and gatherer, it doesn't mean he was just roaming around every day. How he lived was that he followed the seasons. So he moved from place to place, but from time to time he would stop at certain places known as cultural complexes, where they will stay for a certain period of time. Maybe things were in season in that region and in abundance. So they will stay there. Now, so when the men went on hunting expeditions, the women will remain in these cultural complexes with the children. Now, the women will also now go foraging, gathering plants, nuts, berries, fruits, vegetables, sometimes even hunting smaller animals around the cultural complex. And what used to happen, and as is still evidenced today, like when you look at groups like the Khoisan or the Pygmies in Central Africa, the Khoisan in South Africa, the women still produce more, on average, at least 60% of what the group eats. So in a way, women not only invented culture, but culture has always been organized around them, and they've
Mm.
always had economic power within that culture, especially when groups of humans now even settle down in West Africa. The groups that eventually became Igbo, Yoruba people, when they settle down and start farming, from farming, you even produce more surplus than from foraging.
Mm.
So these sub-Saharan African women have always had power. They've never been disenfranchised by some sort of patriarchy. The only patriarchy that disenfranchised them was Western patriarchy.
Mm.
And the origin of patriarchy also starts in Eurasia. When the people that were living just outside Africa then, who were also farmers, but they domesticated two particular animals, the two bovine animals, the goats and the cattle. Then a famine hit their area. They gave up, that's famine and drought. They gave up farming, cultivation of crops, and now became fully pastoralist. This happened, where you have places like Syria, Iraq, Israel today, that Levant, the Fertile Crescent. This is where the first patriarchy in human history is born. So when they gave up farming and became full nomadic pastoralists, the women lost their economic power because they had no more access to land to farm. Meanwhile, the men controlled and had access to and rights over all the animals.
Mm.
I'm sure you've heard of cultures where it's still even practiced today, where the status of a man depending on how many cows he owned.
That's right. Yeah.
You pay dowry in cows, all that kind of stuff. That pastoralist culture starts outside Africa, just that region I described, where you have Iraq, Syria, the Levant, that Fertile Crescent. This is where the first patriarchy is born. And there was a particular dynamic between the nomadic people and some of the other people that were farmers there that also led to the origin of warfare in human history. The nomadic people and the people that were still settled down and farming, they were constantly warring with each
Starman,
other. Yeah.
what's interesting is you're trying to dissociate patriarchy as something that is far from something that could have been obtained in the African cultures, as if also patriarchy was something that was imported. Is that what you're trying to, or borrowed? Is that what you're trying to say? Because I think there are certain universal traits and norms that is in every human culture. And if you want to paint a picture as though patriarchy did not also exist, that's very difficult for me to really buy. The reason, yes,
Okay.
yes.
There's a reason why I'm even trying to lay the ancient historical origins of these things. So I just talked about how the first patriarchy was born when a group of humans gave up farming and tied their destinies to their animals. And those animals and the rights to those animals were controlled by the men. And the women didn't have any access anymore to the land that they produced their own produce for economic activity from.
Hmm.
Now, there's actually two origins of patriarchy. Patriarchy stems from two origins. So the first form of it was this pastoralist model I just told you about. Now the second form of it came out as a result of the constant warfare between the people that were settled farmers and the pastoralists. Now the settled farmers eventually began to build cities around themselves and walls around those cities, and you begin to see the first rise of the first kings. And this rise of kings and the fact that a king controlled the four walls of that city creates a new type of patriarchy. In fact, the ultimate dominant patriarchy we live with today, because the king is the ultimate patriarch.
Mm.
Now, these practices of pastoralism and city dwelling were not going on in sub-Saharan Africa. The sub-Saharan Africans were still living very similar to how you see Khoisan pygmies today. Not, I don't mean in that in terms of material tangibility, but in terms of uh, should I say civilized or civilizing philosophy. So groups like the Khoisan or the pygmies, those groups don't have kings. They don't have, if you don't have a king, see, if you don't have a king, a king creates a certain kind of structure that leads to certain things, class
Mm-hmm.
system, and even slaves.
Yeah.
So these things do not exist in sub-Saharan Africa until the destabilization of the sub-Saharan African region by the Arab invasion of Africa. So you have, like, when you look at Khoisan societies, you have they are run by councils. So you have a council of the older men, and what qualifies you to become a member of that council is age and experience, not just, oh, okay, you're a man. They have a council for the older women too. What qualifies them is their age and their experience. The men are responsible for handling men affairs. The women are responsible for handling women affairs. Sometimes they will intersect. Now, amongst the councils, yes, obviously there is always one man, one old man, and one old woman that will be most revered. But in those ancient societies, that wasn't the equivalent of a king. It just meant, okay, yeah. If you're in a circle of 10 people, by the time you guys talk long enough, you know who is the smartest, and everybody will automatically revere that person. You know, so African societies, yeah, we had matriarchs and we had patriarchs, but not like some sort of organized patriarchy system that, because what you see happen in Eurasia, like with the history of when the Eurasian priestesses used to get overthrown by their male counterparts. It was almost, you could see, it was like there was a real power tussle between the men and the women, especially in with their priests and priestesses over who would control things like their spirituality, their religion. And eventually the men suppressed the women. But it, you don't see African societies suppressing their women until the rise of kings, when African societies start reacting to the, first of all, the Arab slave trade, and then eventually the European slave raids. And then you start seeing a lot of these parts of Africa that existed without any centralized polity. They start centralizing themselves to, you know, in reaction to existential threat. And then you begin to see, first semblances of patriarchy. And like I said, it's something that seems to just bubble out of that hierarchy and class system that you get with kingship
Mm-hmm.
and kingdom. And this is
Right.
when you first begin to see it. And also, finally, when the colonizers penetrate the interiors and see that the women have their own agency, they systematically also crush it. And then with the installation of foreign religions into our heads, like Islam and Christianity, which are actually the most patriarchal ideologies a human being can have in their head, those Judeo-Christian religions, especially Islam. This is when you now see Africa, or sub-Saharan Africans,
African cultures or societies beginning to
exactly.
evolve into. So then, when would you say was it that it became the beginning of feminism in Africa?
Okay, now also in the ancient past, like during the Bantu expansion and all that, and we're talking 3,000 years ago, the region the Bantus migrated from West Africa all the way down to Tanzania is known as the matrilineal belt. And it's not called the matrilineal belt for nothing. It's known as this because of the way a lot of the populations in those regions recognized still the link to their to their matrilineal side is something they kept track of. The your matrilineal lineage had its significance. I mean, unless someone else can give me another reason, I mean, I probably haven't even done a good enough reason. Just just this is just but yeah, they didn't call it matrilineal belt for nothing. And also, I was reading this article where it's also stressed in that article. They stressed that the only part of the matrilineal belt in Africa where you see practice of patriarchy is the parts that have adopted pastoralism. Boom. That's all the evidence you need right there. The
Okay,
parts where
so
they, yeah.
so there are people, you see, patriarchy, capitalism, like the Marxist definition, Marxist feminism will say that it is more of a capital. It's capitalism that is, more responsible as far as the inequalities of the genders is concerned over patriarchy. However, yes, even in societies now, the person that has the most resources will have the more power and control. And so
Mm,
in societies, even in the West, where men are seen to have occupy positions of greater influence and all of that. So yes, you can argue it is patriarchy. You can argue it is capitalist or capitalism. However,
mm,
when you come to Africa, well, in our generation, it's not very. You don't have to look very far to see that all of these things is something that is quite prevalent, and it's very well, you know, seamed into the fabric of society, culture, religion, everything that has to do with Africa. So if the young girls are now getting up with these radical ideas of radical feminism ideas,
mm.
so what would you say? Is it something that is unfounded, or are they misguided young girls?
Okay. Okay. Now,
And by the
white
way,
women.
Sinovia Ridley, yes, I must say, let me just holler my girl, Sinovia. And
Oh,
Lance Bimon, greetings to you too.
okay. So, white women needed feminism. Now, until now, the reason why now any inequality anywhere towards women needs to be addressed. The reason why it looks like Africa needs or African women need feminism is because Africans have largely adopted Western practices, which are very patriarchal. Capitalism is the tool of the patriarchy to control tangibilities. It's capitalism, the flow of money, the creation of scarcity,
Hmm.
and them controlling the distribution since there's now scarcity. That's how they used to control the world and keep themselves in power because they control access, just like a king. I keep saying capitalism and feudalism. The system that you have on there with kings. There's no difference. A CEO and a king, they are none of they are both non-democratic. Even though they'll tell you, oh, capitalism is democratic. A CEO doesn't. His job is to make sure he makes decisions to increase the shareholders' money. He's not there to be democratic. Oh, should we try this? No, 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 no. Just like a king is there just to decree, this is what I want, do it, or else I kill you. You know, and these are all Western systems: capitalism, feudalism. Like I said, within sub-Saharan Africa, there was no kings or kingdoms. If you can look at the history of all those kingdom of Ouagadougou, Mali, kingdom of Congo, none of them is before 1000 AD. None of them starts before 1000 AD. And what was happening around the time 1000 AD that all of them start? Arab invasion from the north of West Africa to the Swahili coast. Literally, the forest was surrounded by invading, slave raiding Arabs. And the people in the forest were reacting. They had to all start rallying around some sort of strong man that maybe was the most confident, as in he knew what to do, how to counter this threat. So, today we're now practicing all this European capitalism, uh, uh, their religions that are very patriarchal. I mean, come on, we all know about Islam and how a woman's word in court is for a woman's you need two women to be equivalent to the testament of one man. All that patriarchal nonsense. So, and you get it in the Bible as well. And today, we Africans, we are now adopting these very toxic patriarchal ideologies. And this is why some of us are misbehaving as well. But it's not too late yet, because it's not got to the
And when you
stage
say
where
some of us are misbehaving, who is the us, the men or the women?
we're aping Western ways now. Yes, a lot of men are misbehaving. Sometimes you see men tell their women, "Oh, the Bible says you're my this, you're my," literally using the
The
Bible
man is the
to,
head.
yeah, using the Bible to to justify rubbish. But this is not what our culture. See, in the past, yeah. Remember, we're talking about how in the past, a woman, if a woman could marry another wife to have a child for her to inherit her property.
If she's unable to bear children.
Yes. In Yoruba land, a woman could initiate divorce. The world wasn't going to end. She wasn't going to be judged. But today you go to church, they tell you till death do you part. And then you now have to start, living in fear of this foreign God and the stigma. They'll stigmatize you all of a sudden just because you don't want to be under this man. Maybe he's beating you or whatever. You're now carrying this stigma that if you break this vow you've taken, somehow you committed this great sin. So
But it's
see,
not the same. It's not the same feeling for the man if you wanted to.
like I said, Islam is these Abrahamic religions are spiritual. In Islam, a man, all he needs to do is, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. I think whether in the presence of one or two people, say I divorce you, whether 3 or 4 times, and then I can do something, and
Is
then
that
that's it.
easy? And you discard of the woman.
That's it. If a computer is designed for Apple OS and you install Windows in it, it's not going to work right. Africans, this is not the way we lived. Today, we're now aping Oyibo way of thinking. And if you ape someone's way of thinking, you start behaving like the person.
So the young girls who are now sounding.
So for the young girls, yeah, this phenomenon, there has always been a feminist movement amongst Black women. And early on, they realized that what they wanted was even very different from what the white women wanted. But it has always been there. And it was, you didn't see this kind of aggressive, toxic fight you see with men today, literally as if just cancel all men, we don't even need them again. You didn't see that. They were just making their reasoned arguments for, which was necessary. And me, I blame it on things like Christianity, Islam, capitalism, all these foreign behaviors we adopted. So yeah, when it was when it was when it wasn't toxic, nobody, you didn't hear. In fact, only a few years ago, you often hear, "Oh, the best men, the best husbands in Nigeria are Igbo men." But today, and I'm talking just literally 10 years ago, today you find Igbo young girls, all those young 20-year-old girls, they are now at the forefront. How Igbo men are demonic, they are evil, they are this. Igbo men, of all people that everybody thought were the most eligible, husbands. And also,
Husband
when you look at a lot
material.
of them, they take these ideas in from, the diaspora. So they take some of the ideas from the white women, but even more of the toxic one from the African American community. Because white supremacy is really doing a number of, on those African Americans. They are those guys are the forefront of the greatest social engineering experiment in human history at the hands of white people. White people are they are trying to destroy those people by destroying their family, and this is the danger of this toxic feminism. If you now have women saying, "Oh, we don't even want," then once they destroy our families, it's only a matter of time our population will go into a decline. And you, and this is white supremacist agenda. It's like our own
Yeah.
women, young girls are now pushing white supremacist agenda, thinking they are doing
So
something good.
if okay, there is a difference when you want to be a feminist because you want equality for
Yeah,
whatever reason,
yeah.
whatever your equality is defined as. For instance, when we were having this conversation, I said to you, if feminism, if I'm a feminist, if you say that because I want to be treated equally as my male counterpart, then yes, you can call me a feminist. If me wanting to have strong economic um, abilities to earn for the same hours and the same job that is being done um, as my male counterpart, if that's me asking that I deserve to be treated equally, then you can call me a feminist. But if the feminist definition by what I've heard those young girls talk about is about exterminating the male gender. It's about black girls now talking about never wanting to have children by black men. Then I'm not a feminist because I cannot understand what kind of destruction movement is that. How can any group of people sit down and decide that if you're not having babies with black men, it's only a matter of a couple of decades, and black children, pure black children, are wiped out off the face of the earth. So if this sort of argument or this sort of idea is propagated and spread across, and young impressionable girls hear about these things, only God knows the sort of damage it can do. So basically, my wanting to understand this is that is what exactly, because I'm not sure if these girls are in the diaspora or if they are continental African girls who are talking these things. Okay, so Starman, you tell me about, you've had interactions with these people.
Okay, they cut across. They okay. So, um, in America, the African American women, because of all the social engineering that has been done on them, the way they lock up their young men, the way they introduce drugs and guns into the hood, and there's this violence in the hood. So the women now, they felt that they've had enough of the men. The men are not carrying their weight, and they are now rebelling against the men. That the men just get them pregnant, go into prison, leave them. There's so many women in America that are of marriageable age. There's not enough men to marry them. There's just not enough. So some of them now develop this new movement. We call it divesting. That
Mm,
I mean, now we're now talking on the fringes of. I'm not saying this is what feminism is. This is the fringes of that movement, and just like any movement you have, you're gonna get the extreme fringes. But we can stay boring and talk about what feminism is, which I'm sure we all know. But where it's leading, what the kind of ideas I'm seeing trickling down, especially into the continent today. So they started this new movement. They call it divesting. That since black men are especially not useful to them economically, that's in America, that they best now start looking to, tie their destiny with other men, especially those of, better economic means, such as white men and Asian men. And, you see them making videos, hosting rooms, giving girls advice on how to meet Asian men, white men, you know, that, they are not, at least they have a job, they're doing better than black men, this and that. That happens. And then we even start getting feedback of some girls who come back and say, look, those guys, some of them are even more violent than black men themselves. Some of them are more. It's all it's cracked up to be. As you have top black men, you will have top white men, and as you have bottom of the barrel black men, there are still bottom of the barrel Asian men. Don't be fooled that, oh, just because you've gone to another race and just because they have more economic power than your race, somehow life will just be better for you. But the movement hasn't stopped. It's still growing. Many of them are still, some of them, I mean, they will even divest to Arabs. Meanwhile, anyway,
Yeah, Synovia Ridley says that's sorry. She says that's sad to hear. And who is this person saying you were both missing the point? What point are we missing? Do you want to type down and let us know what point we're missing? And Michael Alexander says they are listening to some misinformed blacks in the US. Synovia said, I was talking to my daughter last night about dating within her race. There are a lot of black women dating outside of their race. Um, oh, Michael is trying to take us back to the topic, the rise of feminism in Africa. Yeah, we're not talking about rise of feminism in the world. We're talking specifically rise of feminism in Africa because for some people it's a bit of an um, it's confusing to understand the way African cultures breed women and Yes, I mean, I've always known and understood what feminism was, but the aggressive feminism ideas that I'm coming across nowadays is scary. Lance Beeman says, I had hoped that this nonsense would not have been able to gain acceptance on the continent. Oh, yes, Lance. And Washington Stanley says, Black race is under attack, destruction of family values, and LGBT are geared towards Black race extinction.
yeah.
That's absolutely right. When young girls are beginning to talk about they are now never ever wanting to bear children for Black men. That is for me. That was a trick, a light. Like I just thought if these young girls do get away with spreading such ideas, do you know the damage? Where Black people are already under attack from different, it's like from everywhere. It's either from, using war, guns, drugs, also poverty, economically, and now you get a set of young girls that should be nurturing the next generation talking about never wanting to bear Black children. And you're wondering,
Look, some people think this thing is a joke. I mean, like I said, if you want a boring old, oh, feminism, what is feminism? What is the right feminism? We can do that. But we're looking at something toxic, something insidious, creeping into Africa systematically. See, I've, I've heard girls talking about Nigerian girls, Igbo and Yoruba, mainly even, talking about that they should get gone. So that if their man messes with them, I was like, hey, nah, what's going on here? I've heard them talking about poison to the point where they opened a room talking about this. There's this incident that happened in medieval times in Italy. This woman, Julia Tofano, this woman that inspired Italian women who were living under the matriarchy of Rome back then. And to be honest, their men were really oppressing them. I have to agree. So she inspired Italian women, and they created this underground network where they used to produce poison and poison their men. And by the time 600 men died, that's when the state now noticed something is wrong, and the state
something's not right.
and caught them and hung them.
How did
So
how does becoming a feminist make you become a serial murderer of men? I don't understand. There is, I think we need to begin to distinguish people who are bitter and hateful from the idea of a woman wanting to be acknowledged as an equal partner of the other gender,
yes,
because I have never grown up to feel as though I was beneath, like I was second class citizen of a man. And when I talk about a man, not just like a husband, I'm talking generally. I never saw myself as because I'm a woman, or so I'm a lower or the weaker sex, like they would normally say, like my opportunities. My mindset, and I'm African, I'm continental African, and I grew up in Africa. So I always just knew it was about my ability and my, my skills to be able to do what I wanted to do and can compete equally. But when you have, I mean, this is just pure hate.
Yes, and
This is
and
hate
ignorance. Ignorance.
and
I mean, okay,
ignorance.
I've heard them one time. They were pushing this new rhetoric that black women should stop having, and these are. At first, I thought they were African Americans until I realized they were actually Africans in America. This particular group of girls, they were like, black women, in that's black women generally, should stop having
Mhm.
black black boys. I thought, okay, but why? Do you know what they said when I challenged them why? They said, they said, why should I give birth to my future killer? I was like, wait, hold on. Since when did sons start killing their mothers? They now start telling me about this statistic about men killing women in America. Every 5 hours, a black man kills a black woman in America. Apparently, when you look at the numbers, if you were to do like a average of the numbers and spread it out, it's something like every 5 or 6 hours, a black man kills a black woman in America. And it's bad. It's a problem. I know. But what they do is they take these incident. Now, in total, I think it's something like about almost 2,000 black women are killed in America this way at the hands of black men. But when you look at the analysis for white people and Hispanics, who are even more machismo, more masochistic, is higher.
Mm.
But then they just take the numbers and just isolate the black statistics and then extrapolate it. That is all the black men. That we're all, well, they say we're on some broader code that we cover for each other. So I challenge them on it that, so, okay, but please still show me where you see black sons now killing their mothers, that you now don't want to even have a black son. Anyway, they couldn't answer, because the reality is their argument really have any basis. But when you see them hosting their rooms or making one of them has even written a book. They're actually building a following. There are more and more and more girls all the time listening to them.
Hmm.
So when I challenge them on the stopping giving birth to boys thing, and even some girls came up and challenged them that, look, you guys are now even sounding like Hitler because this is eugenics. They now changed the narrative. Their new narrative was now black women stop giving birth to black children. Challenge them again. Say, okay, why? These are not a different day, new day again. Why? Why black children? Because black people all over the world, we are suffering. We're at the bottom of the barrel. Why do you want to give birth to children who are suffering? If you really need
This
kids,
is
why
so
don't you just go and
warped.
adopt? Why don't you just go and adopt? That's how we start asking them. Have you adopted? No. Have you adopted? No. And you begin to realize this is just a group of young girls going through some sort of juvenile delinquency period. They have access
Yeah.
to a phone and audience, and they can just spread toxicity for the clout, the attention. And the problem now, if they were doing it for themselves, that's fine. But the problem is now the way they're spreading it to more and more younger girls to the point where one day, now the new thing now is attacking Igbo and Yoruba culture to small girls. One of the last incidents, there was this video that went viral about this. They were showing this Igbo woman, her husband died, and Umuada were shaving her hair.
Mm-hmm.
There's this celebration, or not celebration, but like an act of mourning in Igbo.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people think it's just Igbo land, where you shave your hair. A lot of people think it's even just the women, where you shave your hair as an act of mourning. And the thing is, in some Igbo lands, in some Igbo parts of Igbo land, it's not even compulsory that you shave your hair. Some part they'll just cut a little bit of the hair. Anyway, in this particular part, this woman shaved her hair, everything off. And in the video, she looked very sad, you know. But she didn't resist. She just looked sad. She didn't resist. They shaved her hair. And me personally, I thought she looked very beautiful. She had a very beautiful shape of head. Next thing I know, this girl's kicked off. You see, Igbo culture is evil. What kind of barbaric practice is it? Is this? You guys don't want to enter into 21st century. When 21st century, you guys are still doing this barbaric nonsense. This, that. You see, a whole week on Twitter, on Clubhouse, these girls were ranting, raving at Igbo culture. Some Igbo girls will come and, if not even the men, no, Igbo girls come and try and defend. But look, it's not even men that
maybe
shave the hair.
maybe the reason they were outraged is the fact that, of course, we also know about women being forced to shave their hair off because they've lost their husbands, but the husbands don't really mourn when they Starman, we need to see your face.
Oh,
The
sorry, yeah.
husbands don't really mourn if they lost their wives back home as much as, because of course there
But
are times when it's not a voluntary thing where the woman wants to shave off her hair because she's lost her husband. She's forced to do so by the husband's family. So maybe that's why they were outraged, isn't it?
now, yes, we know it's one, there's always one or two stories where someone was forced. But we also know that this is a tradition, something that we've always done. And we know that it's not just women that do it. In some parts of Igbo land, the women are not even obligated to do it. In some parts, they just cut a little bit. In some parts, it's even the men that do it. And this is not just something that is
Really?
restricted to Igbo land. Yes.
Do men cut their hair? Anyway, men always cut their hair. It doesn't make a difference anyway.
Well, I guess why it's such a big deal is because, the women invest more in their hair than the men.
That's right.
But
So that's a huge sacrifice for a woman, yes.
yeah, so the thing is, this is not just a practice in Igbo land. This is a global practice, a global culture of shaving hair to respect as an act of respect or mourning the dead. Chinese do it, Indians do it. So even monks, those monks, you remember those ancient monks, in fact, that ritual shaving of the head is called tonsure. Toncu. Oh, I can't remember the spelling again. Tonsure or something like that. Tonture or
Yeah.
something. Yes, ure
So
tonsure.
they also practice it, the Asians.
Yeah, it's a global practice. Globally, all sorts of cultures practice it. The main reason many of them practice it is for mourning the dead. And then there are several other extra reasons why so many other different groups do it. But when
Hmm.
it's us Africans, we get angry, we explode. It's demonic.
On a lighter note, Africans are very most other than the Christians, there are the African, anyway, even the Christians, they're men who are promiscuous. They don't get the side chicks to do the same as they do. The wives have to shave the hair off, wear the hair off. And Washington Stanley said, that's just a joke on the lighter note. Washington Stanley says Africans, especially Nigerians, quickly import and emulate every negativity from America and Europe, from LGBT to cross dressing to feminism. Feminism tends to douse and attack male ego. When a man's ego is doused, it affects his confidence, thereby destroy him inwardly gradually. Why? But Washington Stanley, what is it about? Why should feminism? Well, what point are you trying to make? Maybe you help me type the next to clarify for me exactly what you mean by feminism tending to attack male's ego, because if in the actual sense of it, feminism is about fighting for equality for woman and man, isn't it? So Sinovia Reedy says in Ghana the little girls' heads are shaved. Why? Please explain. Exactly. Like when we had this conversation privately, I kept saying to you there's some things I agree with, there are other things I don't. Of course, also there is liberal feminism, which I pay the price as a working class person now. There are days that I have challenges as a woman, but of course, my office is not taking into account the fact that I struggle as a woman, because we have gone on to fighting for equal rights, equal this, equal that. And right now, there are expectations that you should be able to do as much as the male folk as far as the job you're hired to do. And there are times as women, our bodies just don't, function exactly the way a man's body does, and we're struggling, but we just have to, deal with it and continue as normal. Koti Ekapong Sonny Iyamba, welcome. And Lance Beeman, were these women not challenged by anyone? Starman, that's a question for you. And he goes on to say this is so disheartening. Yes, it is. So let's quickly round up so that today's broadcast is not carried off for
Okay.
too long. So
Yeah.
yeah, you want to respond to Lance Beeman's question about were they not challenged? I think you asked them a question during
I mean,
when they mentioned.
I used to question them all the time in the beginning because I thought, they were going through, maybe I don't want to say trauma because it sounds patronizing, but I just thought maybe me being a historian, I guess, I used to try and put things into historical perspective for them.
Perspective.
But after interacting with them long enough, I've come to understand that it it's it's about bullying. And I think that's what Washington meant when he meant attack on the ego. Because what they do is, like when they have their Twitter rooms and clubhouse rooms, what they do is, I've been in a room where they invite guys up the stage. These girls, young, small girls, they invite guys up stage. And then they tell the guys, and obviously, since they moderate the room, so they can control who speaks by muting mics and who doesn't, so they can mute your mic. So they bring you up the stage, and then they start telling you to, for you to be able to speak, you have to spell this word, and then they'll give you a word to spell. If you misspell the word, they'll start laughing at you that you're an illiterate, you're this, and they'll kick you down
Oh,
the room. Just you know,
Washington Stanley has typed in, I think, a
just
response to helping me understand. Sorry, Starman. I'll let you continue. He
yeah,
says, underground agenda of feminism is simply to attack male ego and not necessarily about equality. A 65 years old feminist was weeping last week in America that she was misguided by feminism. 65 years old. It took her that long to understand. Oh, really? And Michael Alexander says that there are black women here in the US who will never encourage feminism because they know what
yeah.
they know that they know where
I
it
know
came
where it came
from
from.
and
Yeah,
has nothing to do with black women.
yeah. You see,
Yeah, so Starman, from what you were saying, that's pure bullying.
yeah, yeah.
Embarrassing the guy so that he's like that is no, these girls need to be what's the word
And
now?
it doesn't matter
They,
how old you are.
they
Oh. I've seen them embarrass 60-year-old men trying to, talk to them as some sort of uncle. They don't care.
no, they
They
just
don't care.
lost. They just those are girls without culture. Because if I was there, I would have been able to understand for myself exactly by looking at them, listening to them, understanding, trying to analyze them for myself if what exactly their problems are. I'm not a professional psychologist, but I'll be able to do because everything you've said just sounds to me like a group of misguided, bitter, angry bullies who are using the umbrella of feminism to a great extent. And of course, yes, there is radical feminism, which is where I will, categorize those set of people. And it's a very dangerous place to be, especially for black girls or black women, you know. So as we round up, Starman, really quickly recap the first instances where feminist ideas began to prop up on in Africa. You were talking about pastoral and at the time when the kings took over and the need for the kings controlling the resources and patriarchy and all of those things. So yes, just make it a little more clearer as we round
Okay,
up
okay.
the
So,
rise of feminism in Africa.
feminism takes roots amongst African American women in America um, during all those civil rights movements, and then from that time, after during the civil rights movements in the 70s. This is when he also migrated to ideas like Pan Africanism from the US into Africa. But it was still very low key until only about a decade ago, where you begin to see the radical Marxist feminism in the West that was led by all those feminists, Big Red. I don't know that you. There's this one with she sprayed white woman with red hair. If you see this woman screaming at protest, her veins like very aggressive, and she was even a lesbian. That, that's the funny thing. That the real radical white movement of the last feminist movement, the real radical one. Most of the people at the forefront of it were lesbians. Even they just hated. They weren't even attacking. They were just attacking that. They were the ones that centered that whole patriarchy thing. And this is the idea is that many of the new young black feminists have all taken in the that radical, because if you listen to them as well, they're always talking about patriarchy, patriarchy, patriarchy. And it took a while for black men to delineate patriarchy for them, made them realize that look, patriarchy, white people have their own, oh, and everybody is suffering under white patriarchy. Which is why this particular radical group I'm talking about, their attack is black men are the worst patriarchy. Their patriarchy is evil. I would never like to live under their patriarchy, even though we've told them we didn't have patriarchy. And, a lot of these girls, these new feminists, they are young. Some of them don't even discern between hypergamy and feminism anymore. To them, it's just one big idea where they cherry pick the benefits from here and the benefits from there
from
and
there.
in what they don't need, And
Yeah.
then, yeah, like I said, there are several groups of them. There's the Nigerian group, even though those ones I haven't seen them active in a while now, but they were the ones talking about buying gun, buying poison, and then I think why they went off radar was because they found out one of their leaders was pregnant and had 5 children.
That is that's that's a
Seriously,
scam.
yeah.
Washington
And then,
Stanley says you are right. Radical feminists are mostly transgenders.
now, no, they're falling out with the transgenders now because the transgenders, they're finding out that the transgenders are literally using them to get to where they want to. So
Hmm.
they are falling out with the transgenders now. And this particular radical group I've spoken most about this night, that we're talking about
Hmm.
stopping having black boys, then black babies. A good chunk of them are lesbian as well, and many of them are dating white men. And we keep saying to them, okay, you say you've divested from the black community, you don't want anything to do with black community again. Can you now leave the black community again alone? Stop talking about it. They say no, they have to take as many black women with them as possible.
They're on a mission. And from what you said, there's a lot of scam going on in there. I mean, how can you be part of that group and you've had 5 children and your group didn't know that's in Nigeria we call it 419.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. We're gonna be rounding up, really, because the truth of the matter is, with Starman, we never have any broadcast that is under 1 hour. Okay, so but we're going to be rounding up. So yes, so as we call it a day, is we want to talk to young girls on the continent and abroad, you know black girls most especially, in understanding, helping them understand. Especially, you see, the feminist thing is gaining a lot of ground ever since the big names like Chimamanda Adichie, who is a renowned writer, has announced that she's a feminist. Since it became that, you see a lot of continental Africans are becoming very vocal about feminist ideas and all that. And there's nothing wrong with it if you feel whatever, until it comes, for me, if you want to be a feminist, you should define what exactly it is you're looking for, that is what you're fighting for, as far as the two genders are concerned. But in not understanding exactly what your feminism is about, what your ideology for your feminism ideology is about, and you just carry on because you're influenced by someone who is very influential, and you're just running off with it. See, that's where the problem begins to come, because someone is swayed this way by someone with a higher intelligence and a public presence, and somebody else comes with this idea, and some young girls are just beaten by the wind, or by the wave of whatever is trending. But we don't want to look at it as a phase, because it's not a passing phase, because these are young girls who will grow up to raise the next generation. So what are we going to say? What would you say to them in a nutshell? You cannot tell them not to be feminist, no. But what is it? How are you going to help a young girl somewhere, help her understand?
The thing is, you know, there's a reason why they feel the way they feel. And everybody has the right to react to their feelings. But in reacting to your feelings, if you're doing the wrong thing, then you're wasting time and disturbing everyone else. But if in reacting to your feelings you do the right thing, then progress is being made. Like, okay, the Women's Equality Bill in Nigeria. First of all, and this is another example of how, because of Islam, we need feminism in Nigeria today, or we need some sort of activism for women in
Mm,
Nigeria today. When they tried to pass the Women's Equality Bill, and the Northerners, who have major influence in the Senate, said no, because is the women's equality goes against our religion, Islam.
mm.
What the hell? Now, it's because of stuff like this you get these radical feminists react. But to show you that they have no sense of perspective, instead of them to target the Northerners, specifically even the political elite of the Northerners who are behind this nonsense, they target all men. It's all of you men. You
So
know,
is a pushback, to a great extent. It's like an oppression.
but it's not constructive because if okay, so the people that denied women's equality bill were northern politicians. Now, you as the woman could have done several things. You could have organized your fellow women, organized a petition, and taken it to those politicians. Or even if you wanted to shout and scream online, you could have got the names of those politicians and embarrass them, dress them down properly. Not the one that you now go on social media, any random man you see, including men oppressed by these same northern Muslim politicians, the fellow victims, you give them, you bully them, you abuse everything. That's not constructive. If I was going to join you in your fight, but then you're fighting me,
Hmm.
am I? Come on, I'm not firewood now. At some stage, especially when I realize that even as I'm fighting with you, sorry, as I'm fighting on your side, as you're fighting the enemy, you're fighting me as well for apparently no real reason other than I'm a
That's like a
man like
fight when
like your
you're
enemy.
having incoherent fight. You're just throwing blows everywhere, and
Yeah,
you don't even know
yeah,
who you're fighting anymore. You
yeah.
know. So, all right.
Yeah, because
So we
I've
just
told
wait.
them.
You know,
Sorry. No,
Starman, we
so
need we need to
I've
round
told them
up.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've told them that. Look, because I've met more constructive women like you. I've met women that realize that we have, a need for activism for women in Nigeria, but they also recognize that an even more fundamental issue is the structure of Nigeria, which is why you often see them campaigning for, things like self-determination in Nigeria, because they understand that if go back to the way their ancestors lived, they won't even need to be doing feminism for anything.
Well, we can never go back to the way the ancestors lived, because times have changed and society is dynamic. Things will keep evolving. We just need to find a way to for our cultures to go through some level of evolution in a way that we are the ones designing that evolution for ourselves according to our culture and our way of life. So
But it has to come with session. As
mhm.
long as we keep trying to
So
attack
in other words,
the global economy under capitalist system,
mm,
we keep practicing all this Islam, Christianity, these very patriarchal foreign religions.
mhm.
This feminism problem will get worse. It's
but
good
but
because people
African, we're going to go to a different place if I try to ask or question what you just said, because African
Hmm,
traditional religion is very patriarchal as well. And African traditional religion is not something that is imported. This is a conversation that we will keep going back and forth. I mean, even in my town, I remember as a child, there is a shrine in my town in Buguma where a woman is not allowed to have access to that place. There are rituals they do that a woman must not see them doing it. There are rituals they do that any woman in those days, very long time ago, I'm not even sure if they do something very drastic as in killing a woman that sees it. I don't know. Or if they just say that the person dies. I'm not so sure. But the truth is, you know, even African traditional religion is heavily patriarchal. So yeah, because there's would you be able to argue with me which of the rituals or cultures that African tradition, of course there's so many aspects to African traditional religion, whether it's the one practiced by the Yoruba people, Hausa peoples, in when you go to
it's,
the southern Africa, East Africa, there are so
it's
many different types and different ways they do it. So maybe I'm a bit not aware of the fact that there are cultures where even in their traditional religion that the women are the ones that are more, in charge of
exactly
the shrine and the hearing
exactly.
from the gods, and all these things. So it's just a balance that needs to be struck, to be honest, in my opinion, because when I look at the definition, the different aspects of feminism, the only part that scares me to bits is the radical part of it, because when I look at liberal feminism, I agree with some of the ideas there. When I look at difference feminism, I agree with some of the things that are being when you even look at Marxist feminism, there are bits of it that I take from there. But when it comes to the radical part of it, it is just like I'm just pushing it like no, 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 because this is, it's too much, it's extreme, and I don't want it. So it's in trying to find striking that balance.
Well, what I said was we need to go back to our ancestral traditions, not necessarily religion, but even though religion is always a component of those traditions. And African religion is diverse. There's even Igbo religion itself. There's no one Igbo religion. There's a pan Igbo religion. There's about five different branches of Igbo religion. The only thing that unifies all of them is the belief in Chukwu Okike Abiyama. That's all. The
Right.
Nri, they had their own spiritual tradition, which was different from the Aro, and different parts of Igbo land had different nuances to their,
Mm.
to their religion. So there's
And
no
as
one
we
overarching, you know, and in some parts of Africa as well, the women
yeah.
are revered, like shamans and priests. There's this woman that wrote a book about, Mami Water or something like that, and those women used to be revered priests. So and there's also this thing where, a lot of us growing up in the West, having to see the world through Western eyes, even just by going through a Western education, making us see the world through Western eyes. We're always judging things against the West. You know, we have to stop making that mistake, because our ancestors, the fact that
Mhm.
they lived in societies where they've been in those places for tens of thousands of years, and they didn't have constant warfare, they didn't have slavery, they didn't have police. Those guys were smart. They knew how to run society to avoid minimum friction and conflict.
Friction. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Washington Stanley really quickly says young girls shouldn't think feminism. They should be worried about family values. Michael Alexander says, sister, that is evident today, but traditionally it's always started with nature, and nature begins with the woman. The Sangomas. people in South Africa, for example. You know, oh my, it's over an hour already. I knew it was going to be impossible for us to do this under an hour with Starman, to be honest. But yes, you know, well, we should begin to think of having these conversations in other circles. We should look into, because we cannot be facing all these attacks from without and then begin to want to face the one from within, i.e., having our people, our own black girls, beginning to propagate this rubbish about not wanting to have black children. That is a no-no. We need to do something about, bringing these girls, making sure that that rubbish ideology does not see the light of day, that it doesn't infect the minds of young, impressionable African girls and children, basically. You know. Okay, so Starman, we have to call it a day. Our
There's,
original topic,
there's more we could have said, but for the sake of time, and
time.
it doesn't mean that this is the only time we're going to have this discussion. We're going to have it in the future. In the future, I'll even bring some of my friends, female friends, even who are trying to combat this stuff because they can see
Right,
the toxicity of it. I have this
absolutely.
friend that tries to advise girls on the best way you can look after yourself. See, if you're a girl sitting down there thinking, oh, men this, men that, the men have to change, you'll be frustrated though. If you're thinking men will just stop and change and become whatever it is you want, you're just setting yourself up for frustration. The best thing you can do is focus on developing yourself and how to
That's a
protect
powerful
and
one.
take care of yourself.
That's a powerful
You
one.
know,
Yes, focus on developing yourselves, because basically we live in a world where
and
to
how
a
to
very
yeah,
reasonable to a very reasonable level, there are opportunities for both men and women. It's about what you bring to the table beyond your beautiful face and beautiful body. So, yeah, even as a woman, I say so, because it's about the skills that you carry, it's about your intellect, it's about what you actually can offer. You know, there is a lot of market for skills, for ideas. So we should, I'm just not getting on with this rubbish idea of extinction of black children. I'm not for it, whatever the reason you might have that has led you to that point. No, it's never good enough. So yes, young people, young girls, we don't want to self-extinct. It cannot happen. Okay, there's enough attacks to try to get the black race extinct. So don't don't try to add to it. You will be doing yourself no justice. Okay, that will be the much we can take. Yes, I know really says both sexes have to be
yeah,
accountable. Absolutely, absolutely. We must strike a balance. We just need to educate ourselves, and in especially on the African continent, the cultures that I know there are cultural practices that make a woman feel like you shut up when the men are talking. No, like they almost want to categorize women with children, voices you shouldn't be
yeah,
heard, shouldn't be seen until whatever. So these are things that are breeding radical young girls, I believe. Because it's like the world is a global village now. People have access to information. They can see other cultures from their little room in a village somewhere, and they aspire. They're thinking this person is living. She's a girl. She's a woman. She has this freedom. She's allowed to speak. She's allowed to drive a car. She's allowed to have um earn an income, and these things will only it's only a matter of time before the young girls wake up and say, that's it, I'm not having it, I'm not going to sit down here and be subservient all my life. And so we also must take responsibility in knowing that we shouldn't breed monsters by oppressing, so basically, that is it. Remember to like, follow, share, subscribe to our channels. It's been a wonderful Tuesday, and tomorrow is a busy day. I'm sure everyone is looking forward to, calling it a day soon. Thank you, everyone that joined us. It was very, it was interesting, an interesting conversation. And for those of you who didn't know that such a thing even exists, that such ideas will even be, you know, something that will be out there from black girls themselves. Now you know you have to begin to talk about it and make sure that all the young girls in your area are very, steadfast in, the values and norms and of, what makes us a better society, men and women inclusive, included in that society. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Take care,
Bye bye,
guys. Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
I know